The command center was loud and tense, officers rushing between screens, radios crackling with static, when suddenly an angry voice cut through the noise. "Your ground crew don't touch the tactical flight board," an officer shouted sharply, his eyes fixed on a young woman who stood by the wall-sized map marking small symbols with a blue pen. His face turned red with frustration as he barked again. "This is not your place. Step away immediately." But the young woman did not flinch. She stayed calm, her hand steady as she checked the coordinates and the high-altitude wind patterns carefully. Her silence only fueled the officer's anger, yet she kept working as if she had not even heard him. Her name was Lena Moreau, 28 years old, with brown hair tied back in a simple bun. Her figure was slim and small, almost fragile next to the massive fighter jets she worked on every day. She was born to French and Austrian parents, raised in a quiet town where no one thought she would ever step near a military base. Yet here she was, standing among officers and pilots who never saw her as more than a background worker. To them, she was only ground crew, a helper, someone who fueled planes and checked wires, nothing more. Every day, Lena's duties were simple: check hydraulic pressure, refuel tanks, clean sensors, and make sure that all systems looked ready. She wore the same plain uniform, carried the same tools, and kept her head down. Most people on base barely noticed her except when they wanted to mock her. The pilots were the worst. They treated her like she was part of the machinery, always there but never worth listening to. Last week, Captain Morrison had laughed when she corrected a misaligned targeting system. "Stick to cleaning gauges," he had said, his tone sharp and dismissive. "What do you know beyond valve pressure?" added Lieutenant Torres with a smirk. The room had erupted in quiet chuckles. Lena had said nothing, her face unreadable, her eyes lowered to the floor as if their words had no weight. But inside she remembered every insult, every dismissal, and every moment she was told to stay in her place. She did not argue. She did not fight back. Instead, she worked quietly, finishing her assigned jobs with perfect precision. But Lena saw things others ignored. She noticed small errors in pre-flight navigation. She watched pilots plan courses without checking the weather carefully. She saw wind calculations that were dangerously off. She even saw young aviators make small mistakes that could cost them their lives. And every time she bit her tongue because if she spoke, they would only laugh at her again. Still, Lena's mind never rested. When her shift ended and the hangar lights dimmed, she walked to her small room, opened her notebook, and began her secret work. She filled page after page with hand-drawn flight diagrams, fuel estimates, weather patterns, and radar scatter analysis. She read books on aerodynamics, meteorology, and tactical aviation, not because anyone asked her to, not because she was trained, but because she could not stop herself. She knew deep inside that this knowledge could save lives. Her notebook was her world. Every line of ink carried calculations that nobody else bothered to make. Every page was a silent record of mistakes she had noticed but never dared to point out. The other ground crew teased her for carrying that notebook everywhere. They called her obsessive, the pilots called her presumptuous, and the officers rolled their eyes when she mentioned anything beyond her mechanical duties. Yet Lena kept going. Night after night, she trained herself for something that might never happen, but that she knew someday could. She believed that one day her hidden knowledge would be the difference between safety and disaster, and though nobody else knew it, she was preparing for that moment with quiet determination. One afternoon, she had even saved a fighter without anyone realizing it. The auxiliary wind guidance system had failed during a crosswind landing, and Lena had manually adjusted the stabilizer fins. The F-16 touched down safely. The pilot climbed out, glanced at his instruments, and walked away without a word of thanks. Lena said nothing. As always, she did not fix things for recognition. She fixed them because the planes needed to work, and because pilots needed to live. This was Lena's world, mocked for her silence, ignored for her ideas, and dismissed for her knowledge. Yet every day she carried the weight of responsibility in her own quiet way. Nobody could see it, but she was preparing for a future only she could sense. The morning that changed everything began like any other. The sky pale with first light, the hangar buzzing with engines warming up, and Lena crouched under the wing of an aircraft checking hydraulic lines, her hands stained with oil, her notebook tucked safely in her tool bag. Then the alarm shattered the routine, a blaring scramble. Alert ripped through the base, echoing across hangars and corridors. Pilots ran, crew members shouted. The sound of boots hitting concrete filled the air. Echo Squadron was in combat. 6 F-16 fighters had engaged hostile aircraft in Sector 7, and now their desperate voices crackled through the radios. "Base, this is Echo 6 Actual. We have multiple bandits. Navigation jammed, GPS unreliable. We need immediate flight lead for safe return." The command room froze. Officers looked at one another in shock. The main flight coordinator was away. The backup was sick, and the computers were jammed. Lena paused in the hangar, the wrench slipping in her hand, her heart pounding as she heard the words through the intercom. She knew what this meant. Without guidance, Echo Squadron could be lost. 5 minutes later, the radio came alive again. Urgent, sharp, impossible to ignore. Echo 6 to base. Repeat. Request flight lead immediately. I only fly if she leads. The room went silent. Every officer stared at the radio, confusion rising. Then slowly, their eyes turned toward the maintenance section, where Lena Moreau stood frozen, the forgotten ground crew, now suddenly called by name in the middle of combat. The command room was frozen in silence, radios hissing, every officer staring at the transmission that had just come through. The voice of Captain Gerard, leader of Echo Squadron, clear and steady despite the chaos around him. "Base, I repeat. I will only fly if she leads." The words hung in the air like a shock wave. Who was he talking about? Who was this mysterious figure he trusted in the middle of battle? Major Richards, the maintenance supervisor, frowned and barked into the radio. "Echo 6, clarify your request." "Who do you mean? There is no such call sign here." The reply came instantly, sharp with urgency. "French-Austrian female, 28 years old. She is in your maintenance section. She guided me once before." "She is the one we call Ground Angel." Gasps spread across the room, and slowly eyes turned toward Lena Moreau. Still standing with oil-stained gloves in the maintenance area, she looked small and out of place, as if she had no idea why her name was now being dragged into the heart of an aerial battle. Whispers filled the command center, some officers scoffing, others muttering that this was absurd. How could a ground technician be requested as a flight lead? It made no sense to them, yet the pilots in the sky were insisting, their lives hanging by a thread, their jets low on fuel, their navigation crippled by jamming, their voices steady but desperate as they called again. "Ground Angel, if you can hear us, we need you now." Lena's heart pounded as she looked at her notebook resting on the console, the same notebook everyone mocked her for. Filled with diagrams, equations, and wind calculations, she could see the data in her mind. She could already sense the safest path home through the storm that was forming on the horizon. But her voice was locked inside her chest, because she knew speaking would bring more ridicule, more anger, and maybe even punishment. The base commander, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes, stepped forward, his face tense. "Moreau, what is this? Do you know what they are talking about?" Lena hesitated, her voice low. "Sir?" Before she could finish, another call cut through the static. "Base Echo 6. We are Winchester on missiles. Low on fuel. We have injured aboard. Without immediate guidance, we will be forced to attempt emergency landing in hostile airspace." The tension spiked higher, every second ticking away like a hammer, yet the officers still argued, some saying it was madness to let a ground crew member interfere, others insisting they had no choice. Lena stood at the edge of the room, her hands trembling. She remembered the night years ago when she had first heard Gerard's voice through static-filled radio waves, how she had guided him step by step through manual calculations, how she had broken every rule but saved both him and the aircraft. That secret had lived only in her memory, and in his. Now it was being dragged into the open under the weight of crisis. Major Richards glared at her, his voice sharp. "Is this true? Did you once guide a jet down?" Lena's eyes flickered to him, then back to the floor. "Yes, sir," she whispered. 3 years ago, during a failed training flight, I was testing protocols and I made the call. I never told anyone because it was classified, but Captain Gerard was that pilot. The room erupted, disbelief, anger, and shock, colliding at once. Yet over it all, the voice of Gerard returned, calm but commanding. "Base, we are outnumbered, jammed, and nearly dry on fuel. Your systems are useless right now. Trust her. She can bring us home." Lena's notebook lay open now, pages filled with inked lines showing projected wind shifts and pressure differentials. She knew the data. She had tracked the weather earlier. She could do this, but the authority was not hers. The weight of the decision sat with the commanders who looked torn between pride and survival. Outside the hangar, the sky darkened, clouds rolling in, the storm front pushing closer, a dangerous mix of crosswinds and turbulence that could tear apart a formation flying blind. Echo Squadron had only minutes left before they would be forced to eject or be destroyed. The sound of the klaxon still echoed through the base, pressing urgency into every corner. Lena clenched her fists, hearing her own breath over the noise. She was tired of being silent, tired of watching mistakes pile up while she stood unseen. Her voice finally broke through, steady but trembling with resolve. "Sir, I can guide them. I know the patterns. I have the calculations. If you allow me to speak to them, I can bring them back." The officers stared at her as if she had spoken blasphemy. One shouted, "This is insane!" Another snapped, "She has no authority. She is not trained." But then a young technician in the corner whispered what everyone already knew in their hearts. "No one else can do it. The computers are dead, the coordinators are gone, and those pilots are about to die." The commander looked at Lena for a long moment, his jaw tight. The radio hissed again. "Echo 6, actual, this is our final request, Ground Angel. We trust you. Guide us home." Gerard's voice cracked with emotion as he added, "Please." Every eye turned to Lena, the forgotten ground crew, the mocked technician with her oil stains and her notebook. She swallowed hard, her hand hovering above the microphone. She was standing on the edge of the moment she had trained herself for in silence. The room waited, hearts pounding, breaths held, time slowing. Would the commanders give her permission? Would Lena dare to cross the line again? Her fingers brushed the microphone, and with that simple touch, the future of Echo Squadron balanced on her next breath. The entire room seemed to lean closer as Lena's hand hovered over the microphone, her fingers shaking slightly, sweat dampening her palms. The commanders still hesitated, but outside the storm was closing in, and the squadron's voices grew. Sharper through the radio, "Ground Angel, time is running out. We need guidance." Now, Lieutenant Colonel Hayes turned toward Lena with hard eyes. "You claim you can do this? Then explain. Why should I trust you with 6 pilots' lives?" Lena took a deep breath, her voice low but steady. 3 years ago, during a training exercise, an F-16 lost all systems. No navigation, no radar, nothing. But static on the line. I was working late in an auxiliary control room. I had been testing manual protocols. I broke the rules. I used calculations by hand, and I guided that pilot down safely. The room filled with murmurs, disbelief, and shock, rippled across the faces of seasoned officers who could not imagine that this quiet ground crew had ever touched flight coordination. Major Richards stepped forward, his voice sharp. "And who was that pilot?" Lena looked at him, her eyes steady for the first time. It was Second Lieutenant Gerard, the man you now know as Captain Mateo Gerard. Gasps rose again, and the radio crackled almost instantly with Gerard's voice. "That is correct. She saved my life. She was the voice that night. I never forgot, and I will not let my squadron fall when the only person who can save us is standing in your hangar." The silence that followed was heavy, like the weight of the storm pressing down on the roof. Lena's secret life was out now. The hours of study, the notebooks, the calculations, all the preparation she had hidden in shadows had burst into the open. The officers stared at her, their pride wrestling with the reality that their systems were useless and their pilots were about to die. One young officer spoke in a trembling voice. "Sir, if she is telling the truth, then we have no choice." The commander's jaw tightened, his pride heavy. But Gerard's next words cut through the static like a blade. "Base, we are down to minutes of fuel. If you deny her, you deny us our lives." The thunder outside rumbled, the storm now moving directly into the sector where the squadron was struggling to fly, winds shifting dangerously, lightning flashing in the distance. Lena clenched her fists. Every fiber of her body begging to act, she could see the paths in her mind, every wind current, every shift in pressure. She could already feel how to guide them, she whispered. "Let me do this, not for me, for them." Finally, Hayes gave a sharp nod. "Permission granted, do it, but if you fail, the blame is yours alone." Lena did not flinch. She stepped forward, her hand pressing down on the microphone, her voice steady as the storm outside. "Echo Squadron, this is Ground Angel. I am on frequency. Prepare for manual navigation guidance." Relief flooded the channel. Gerard's reply, strong and filled with, "Trust, Ground Angel. This is Echo 6 Actual, ready to receive, waiting for your call." Around her, the officers still looked doubtful, some muttering that this was madness, but they fell silent as Lena's eyes fixed on the radar screen, her notebook, open beside her, pages filled with numbers and hand-drawn diagrams. She began speaking with calm authority, words flowing like she had done this all her life. Echo 2. "Adjust heading to 265, Echo 4. Climb 50 feet to clear turbulence. Echo 5, hold steady. Compensate 3 degrees right for wind shear on the auxiliary." Radar. The faint blips representing the squadron began to shift, aligning perfectly with her commands. The room went silent as they watched her coordinate 6 jets with nothing but calculations and instinct. Major Richards whispered without realizing it, "She's doing it. She's really doing it." Lena's face was calm, her eyes scanning the shifting data, her mind racing through equations faster than any computer. Years of quiet practice now guiding her hand. Every word she spoke carried weight, every command precise. Echo Squadron began to stabilize, their formation tightening as they trusted her voice. Gerard's voice broke through again. "Ground Angel." "How do you see the storm front?" Lena answered instantly. "I tracked it an hour ago. It will cut across your path in 10 minutes. Increase speed to 280 knots. You will clear it just before it peaks." The commander blinked, shocked. How could she have known that without the main system? Lena's voice was firm. "I calculated the pressure shifts during my lunch break. I knew the storm would build by evening, so I prepared." Around her, the men and women who had mocked her now watched in silence. No laughter, no dismissive words, only the sound of her guiding voice filling the air. The ground crew, who had been told to stick to cleaning gauges, was now commanding the skies. But as she worked, Lena felt the weight of what was coming. The squadron was safe for now, but fuel was dropping fast. One more mistake and they would be forced to eject into hostile airspace. She knew the hardest part had not yet come. The final stretch back to base would demand everything she had. Still, her voice remained calm, every word carrying the confidence of someone who had been training for this moment in secret for years. "Echo Squadron, stay sharp. You are not alone. Follow my voice. Follow the sky as it truly is, not as your broken instruments tell you. Trust physics. Trust the wind. Trust me, the squadron acknowledged, their voices stronger now, hope returning where only fear had been. Gerard's final words for this leg were filled with quiet respect. Ground Angel, we are with you. Inside the command center, officers who once ignored her now leaned on every word she spoke, their disbelief slowly turning into awe, while outside the storm raged and enemy fighters circled. The fate of 6 jets and their crews now rested in the steady guiding voice of a woman they had mocked as nothing more than ground crew. And though Lena's voice carried calm strength, deep inside she knew the storm ahead was not just in the sky, but in the fight she would have to win against time, fuel, and the pride of those who had always refused to see her. The storm rumbled across the horizon like a living beast, lightning tearing open the clouds, thunder shaking the air. Yet inside the command center, the only sound that mattered was the steady voice of Lena Moreau as she guided Echo Squadron through hostile skies. Her words were calm, sharp, and full of confidence. Ground Angel to Echo 3. Adjust course 2 degrees right. Turbulence ahead. Hold formation tight. On the radar screen, the 6 faint blips obeyed instantly. Moving in perfect rhythm with her commands, the officers who had once mocked her now leaned forward, eyes wide, unable to look away from the impossible. A ground technician with oil stained hands was doing the work of an entire flight coordination team. Echo 6. Actual. Gerard's voice came through. Fuel critical. How long until we reach base? Lena's eyes scanned her notebook, pages already filled with quick equations and weather. Notes. Her pencil moved fast, her mind even faster. She replied without hesitation. 12 minutes to base if you follow Vector 270, but Echo 2 you must climb now. There is wind shear waiting. The pilot's voice crackled back. Copy Ground Angel. Climbing. The formation shifted again, the radar confirming her call was correct. Officers exchanged stunned looks. They knew their own systems could not see through the jamming. Yet Lena had predicted every dangerous shift with nothing but her calculations and her instincts. But the danger was far from over, because fuel gauges were dropping lower with every passing second. Gerard's voice returned. One of my pilots is at bingo fuel. Another is bleeding hydraulics. If we fail to land soon, we will lose aircraft. Lena tightened her grip on the microphone, her voice steady. No, you will not. You will follow me. You will listen to every word I say. And you will make it home. Outside the hangar doors, the storm had arrived, heavy rain slashing against the ground, winds howling through the base like a warning. The crew on the ground rushed to clear landing strips, preparing emergency lights and safety gear. Yet every eye kept drifting toward the radio room, toward the young woman who was holding everything, together with nothing but her voice. Echo Squadron, push speed to 280 knots, Lena commanded. Climb above the storm front, ride the jet stream at flight level 200, conserve what fuel you can. Her voice cut through the static like a blade, strong and absolute on the auxiliary. Radar. The jets climbed together, their icons rising smoothly, escaping the worst of the turbulence. Major Richards whispered under his breath, "This is impossible. She is guiding them blind. No one should be able to do this without systems." Yet, he could not deny what he was seeing. Lena had transformed. No longer the quiet ground crew with her head down. Now she stood tall, every word carrying authority, her eyes burning with focus, as if the sky itself bent to her calculations. Gerard's voice cracked in again. Ground Angel, hostile fighters, shadowing us, no weapons left to defend. Advise. Lena closed her eyes for a brief second, then opened them with fire. Echo Squadron, increased descent rate 500 feet. Turn heading 255. Hostile radar will lose lock in the storm cells. Maintain radio silence until I call. The officers watched in disbelief as she used the storm itself as a shield, guiding the jets into heavy cloud banks where enemy tracking could not follow. For several tense minutes, only static filled the room, everyone holding their breath, until finally Gerard's voice came back. Ground Angel, your call worked. Hostiles lost contact, continuing vector home. The command room erupted in whispers of shock and relief, but Lena did not pause, her pencil scratched across the notebook, calculating final descent paths. Her voice. Calm again. Echo Squadron, prepare for landing pattern. Fuel check. Echo 5 report. A weak voice replied. Ground Angel, this is Echo 5. Fuel almost gone. I cannot hold. I do not think I will make it. The room froze, every officer staring at Lena, waiting. She pressed the microphone tighter, her voice firm yet soft. Yes, you will. Echo 5, listen to me. You will cut power by 5%. Glide with the wind. Hold steady on heading 270. Do not panic. Trust the sky. Trust me. Her words flowed like steel wrapped in warmth, her tone leaving no space for fear. Echo 5's breathing was heavy on the channel, but he answered, Copy Ground Angel, reducing power. The blip on the radar dipped dangerously, then steadied, holding course exactly as she had predicted. The tension inside the command center was unbearable. Men and women who had laughed at her just days ago now clenched their fists, praying she was right, because every second meant life or death. Thunder shook the walls. Rain poured harder, yet her voice did not waver. Echo 6. Actual. This is Ground Angel. Visual contact in 4 minutes. Align formation. Prepare landing sequence. You will touch down one by one. No mistakes. No hesitation. Her tone carried a weight that silenced the storm inside the room. Even the commander stood in quiet awe, realizing this young woman had already become the leader they all needed. The radar flickered, static rising as the storm disrupted signals. For a moment, it seemed the blips might vanish. Hearts froze. Then they reappeared, aligned and steady, flying exactly as she commanded. On the horizon outside the rain-filled sky, faint silhouettes began to appear, dark shapes breaking through. The storm clouds, one after another, 6 jets fighting gravity, wind, and exhaustion. Yet holding together in perfect formation, the ground crew rushed outside, faces turned upward, disbelief turning to hope. While inside, Lena's voice guided every movement, every breath, every step closer to safety. But the fight was not over, because as the first jet neared the runway, a new problem hit the radio. Echo 2's landing gear indicator failed, warning. Lights flashing red, the pilot's voice cracked with panic. Ground. Angel. Gear not responding. Emergency. Emergency. The room froze again. The storm roared louder, every second more dangerous. All eyes turned back to Lena, waiting. The fate of yet another pilot now hanging on her next words.